learned since I've been in Mexico. I've learned that a lot of the things that concern technology in the United States are the same things that concern technology or you're concerned about with technology in Mexico. We're concerned about our students. We're concerned about the retention rates of our students. We're concerned about a lot of things. If you're like me and a technologist, we're concerned about when our servers go down, or we're concerned about the number of hours that we work. But I thought back to why I became, or why I wanted to start a career in technology. And as I began thinking, one thing was money, right? We've got to make money for our families. We've got to earn a living for our families. But when you really get down to the core of why we started in our fields, it was about creating things that make life better. It was about fixing problems. I can remember a story that I probably drove my parents crazy because I was always taking things apart and I never put things back together, because I wanted to figure out how things worked. One time I took the light socket on the wall apart and stuck a pair of tweezers in it to understand how electricity works. Now I wouldn't recommend that for anybody, but that's what we do as technologists. We understand how things work. And I got my degrees, or the reason I got my degrees was because I wanted to be a bridge between academia and technology. I wanted to understand how academia works so that I could help and benefit technology. The other reason I got my degree was because I grew up in a very, when I say very small town, it was a small town. If I wasn't kin to the person, I knew their first and last name. So in growing up in that small town, it was probably understood that we weren't going to have the opportunity to do the things that a lot of people in larger towns would do. When I was growing up, if you would have told me that I would have had the chance to go to Harvard, I would have told you you're crazy, because that's just not an opportunity that was presented to me. See, the success was not told to me that I could do anything that I wanted to do in life, and all I had to do was put forth a little effort. And I think that's part of the problem when we look at student success is sometimes we don't tell the students that they have the opportunity to succeed, and then other times we don't give them the tools that they need to succeed. And that's what I'm going to talk to you today about, is opportunities and success and what we did at Delta State to help students be able to succeed. And then I'm going to show you at the end some of the numbers that we've had, because a lot of times students just need an opportunity. So let's start. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the importance of student success to kind of give you an agenda here. I'm going to talk to you about probably a little boring part about Delta State or where we are, and then I'm going to talk to you about products that we installed and implemented. Now, the interesting thing about technology is technology should always make life better. We should never install or implement a technology that makes life worse or that makes life harder for people. Technology is designed as a tool to make life better. It's designed to solve those problems that we started talking about to start with. And that's why I love technology, is I love the opportunity to implement something that makes life better for others. So if I were to ask you, what is the importance of student success? What do you think your answers would be? It would be that we have to have students in order to have universities, right? We have to have students out there. But you probably have some type of mission statement or some type of vision statement for your university that has something to do with student success, with making students successful, because it's important. But if I were to ask you to drill down and say, what one sentence reflects student success on your campus, what would that be? What would that one sentence? Think about the one sentence that reflects student success on your campus. What is that? And is it the same for your department as it is the same for your provost or president or your board? Is the same success statement the same for your IT area as it is for the university? And if it's not, you should start looking at how do you align student success for technology with the mission statement and the vision statement for the university. And that's one thing that I think that we've done that's very important. Now, when you look at student success is not just for one area. It's not the student success department, but it's every single area at the university has to be invested in student success. It's everybody working together to make sure it's important. It's the admissions department, it's our teachers, our faculty members, it's the student success department, it's advising, it's tutoring, it's every single person. And then right there in the middle That's where you come in, because you're kind of the glue that holds everything together. You have the systems, you have the knowledge, and you have the talent to be able to implement systems that do support student success. That's why technology is so great, because we get to touch every single part of the university. You know, when people call me, nobody ever calls me and pats me on the back and says, wow, great job. They call me and they say, I've got a problem and I need you to solve it. That's the majority of the problem. And that's the great thing about technology. That's why I started technology in a technology industry to start with, is because I wanted to be that problem solver. Well, what's the biggest problem that we have at universities? Retention rate, student success. Trying to get students in our university. If you look at the mission and vision statement for Delta State University, there are two words that come to mind: retention and recruitment. That's the biggest things that we're worried about. So if I can solve or help solve retention and recruitment, then I look like a rock star. And you would too. So let's talk about it a little bit. What goes into it? Student success. Why is it important? Now, if you ask a business person here, and I have an undergrad in business, if you ask a business person what's the importance of student success, the first thing that's going to come to their mind is numbers. You know, the more numbers we have, the more money we make, the more money we make, the more successful we are. If we turn in these reports to our state institutions that say that our retention rates are 90%, then they're going to look at us like we're doing our jobs right. Okay? And those are all really, really important things. Numbers are important. I love numbers. In technology, I have to love numbers, right? We all love numbers. But what if I told you that numbers are not the most important thing? What if I told you that numbers were not the most important thing? You'd probably think I was crazy, right? But numbers are not the most important thing. This is what's the most important thing. Because as you look at the faces that are up here, I'm going to tell you there's somebody's son or daughter up there that's going to school. There's somebody's husband or wife that's up there that's going to school. There's somebody that's a single mom up there that's working 2 jobs that's going to school. And you know what? They think that their future and the success of their future depends on getting their college education, and they're absolutely right. You know, when we break it down and we get past the numbers, it's the faces that are important. Now, what if I told you that only 57% of those faces that you see on that screen would persist from their first year to their second year? You would say, we've got a problem, right? And that's what we saw at Delta State. This is not our bottom students. These are students, we have what's called an ACT, and I'm going to be talking about ACT more in just a minute, but these are what we would call the murky middle. These are the ones that are not taking remedial courses, that are taking right above the remedial courses, but they're not our star students either. And these students were actually, the retention rates of these students were the worst at the university. Our normal retention rate's about 67%. These were about 57, 58%. So if you look at those, half of those students, their dreams were going to be squashed. They were not going to be able to get a college education. They were not going to persist in the next year. Now, if you polled these students at the first semester and said, how many of you are going to graduate in 4 years? Over 90% of them would say they were going to have a degree in 4 years. Now, what happened? There's a communication breakdown. They thought they were going to be successful, and almost half of them were gone at the end of the year. So there's a problem here. And if we're problem solvers, then what do? We find solutions for it, right? And that's what our job is, to find solutions. So every number has a face to it. And when we get to that, we start personifying the problem, and it becomes more real. The success of each student drives the overall success of the university. It drives the overall success of the communities. It drives the overall success of the individual, and that's important. And the other reason is that degree is important to that individual face up there. It's the most important thing at the time, is them getting successful. Why? Because in the U.S., and this is a report from New York, in the U.S., a person without a degree has the opportunity to make about $28,000 a year. A person with a bachelor's degree has the opportunity to make about $87,000 a year. That is a life-changing moment for that individual. And that's why student success is important, because we have the opportunity to change the lives of the people there. So, I told you I was going to tell you about boring stuff about Delta State, but I have to get you the frame of mind of where Delta State was when we noticed, or when we started working on this problem. Delta State has about 3,500 students. So we're a relatively small school, but we're located in the Mississippi Delta. Now let me tell you some good things about the Mississippi Delta. The Mississippi Delta has a lot of Pulitzer Prize winning authors. Anybody know what the Muppets are? Jim Henson was from the Delta, okay? So he's from, also, anybody like the blues? The blues are what was the birth of rock and roll. The blues were born in the Mississippi Delta. As a matter of fact, they just opened up a Grammy Museum in the Delta, and it's the second Grammy Museum. Now, the other thing about the Delta, let's talk about the bad side. The Delta is the poorest counties in the poorest state in the United States, okay? Most of the students that we get are from low-income families. They're the first time that they've had the opportunity to go to school. Most of them, only 11% of them are considered college ready. So we've got our work cut out for us to start with. These are not the best and the brightest. These are not the Ivy League people, but they are people that if we get them a college degree, they can change the path of their families for years to come. 65% of our students are from the 18 counties that make up the Delta, and 70% of them are considered Pell eligible, which means they're getting some kind of state funding. Okay? So if we identify our retention rates, our 4-year graduation rate for these students was about 15.1%. Wow. That 90-something% thought that they would graduate in 4 years, but only 15% of them actually do graduate in 4 years. That's amazing. So we had low retention and graduation rates. If we look at the national average was 34% graduate in 4 years. Now, why aren't they graduating in 4 years? Most of them take the minimum course load required. So they take 12 credit hours. Well, 12 credit hours actually won't get them to where they need to be. Mississippi, the average is 27.6, and we're at about half that. We're at 15.1%. So we had a lot of work to do to start this off. Now, if you look at 6-year graduation rate, so add 2 more years to it, we should be doing great, right? The national average, 57%. Mississippi average, 49%. Mississippi's catching up. Delta State was at 35.4%, 6-year graduation rate. So what ends up happening is those students that thought that they were changing their lives by getting a college education now just have a lot of college debt that they have to pay back. So it's a drain on society instead of being productive for society. So what was the context of the problem? To compound that, we had 11.2% population decline. So all of this is bad news, right? That would say Delta State is declining, there's no way, and that's what our state legislature actually thought when we brought them to us. They thought that Delta State was on a downhill decline and that we couldn't recover from it. Now, I wouldn't be here talking to you today if we didn't. So there's some good news at the end of this that we're going to talk about. So it's not all bad news. So if we look at the ACT that I told you about, ACT is our standardized test that we give to students to see if they're capable of getting a C average or better when they come to college. What do you think our students were? Okay, if you look at English composition, they had to have an 18 in order to be considered college ready. In algebra, they had to have a 22. In social sciences, a 22. In biology, a 23. If we look at the Delta, only 46% of the students taking the test were actually considered ready for English. In reading, only 27%. In math, 20%. In science, 19%. So the average student coming to us, were only 11% of those students were considered college ready. That means coming through the door, they have to take some type of remedial class. So let's move on. So what did we do? We started a student success task force. Remember I talked about all of those parts of the university? We brought them all together to the table and said, how do we solve this problem? We actually brought a consultant in from Ellucian that did a student success 360, that met with all of those parties and all those people and said, okay, what are we going to do to solve that? We started something called Stay Okra Strong, SOS. And faculty members were allowed to send an SOS alert on a student that was struggling. For that student, we had tutoring available for them. We let them know what was going on. We gave them early information. We started helping them out. That group actually started a process that allowed us to apply for a grant that I'm going to talk to you that was called First in the World. The U.S. government said education is struggling in the United States. And if you looked at the education trend and you've seen some of the TED Talks, you saw that the United States educational system is on a decline. The U.S. government said, how do we turn this around? How do we make this better? So they offered this grant opportunity called First in the World, and they wanted universities to come up with new, intuitive ways to solve the education problem that we were in. we adopted several things. So I wanted to get to this slide right here. This is a very busy slide, but you're welcome to this PowerPoint. This is what we submitted to the U.S. government that said, this is how we're going to solve the issue with student success for Delta State University. You notice I haven't talked about a technology yet, because I said technology is a tool that's supposed to solve a problem. The first thing we had to do was identify the problem that we were going to solve, and then find a solution that fitted. You know, I had a CIO of mine one time, and there was a vendor that came in and he did this presentation. And the vendor was just going on and on and on about how good his product was and what it did and what it would solve. And at the end of the presentation, he looked over at my CIO and he said, well, what do you think? And he said, well, your product was probably pretty good for most people. He said, but here's the problem. I got a size 10 foot and you're selling a size 6 shoe, and it's not going to fit. And that's a lot of times what we do with technology is we implement something ahead of defining what the problem is, and it just doesn't fit. It doesn't work. So the first thing in any solution is defining what the problem is. So what we did was we looked at what's called what we developed was a student success life cycle. We wanted to implement something from the first contact we had with a student till they graduated. Now, we define student success as graduating. Now, students probably define student success as getting a job that pays a lot of money. So there's a difference in the definition, but for our purpose, we define student success as graduation. And we identified key areas that we wanted to be able to communicate with those students. And then after we defined that, and after we went through the Student Success 360, then we started looking for a technology that would fit that size 10 foot. And what we did was, we put out a bid. Any vendor could bid on it, and we listed what we wanted to solve. Ellucian came with their CRM advice. And I'm really glad they did, because it was a flexible software that allowed us to identify issues that were for our students, issues that our students had a problem with, and we could actually, it was very malleable. We could mold it and make it do what we needed it to do. It wasn't a one-size-fit-all solution. It was a solution that we could make that was unique to Delta State and the needs of the students at Delta State. So, let me first start asking this question, and this goes back to where we were at before. If I were to ask every one of those departments that we talked about earlier at your schools to write down their mission statement, would every one of them be different? Would every mission statement be different? Well, if you're taking a ship and you're trying to go all in the same direction and everybody has a different mission statement, are you going in the right direction? Probably not. So bringing those groups to the table and getting those mission statements aligned is very important. And that's one thing that our university did early on in this process was they said that those retention numbers were not great. They said that we had a problem, we had to define, and we were going to devote the resources to make that work. And that means aligning the admissions department mission statement and the technology mission statement and student success mission statement and all of those other mission statements into those common characteristics that make student success great. So, one thing that we had to do was we had to place a priority on the needs of the students. Well, how do you identify where the needs of the students are? How do you know why students are failing? Now, as technologists, you hold the keys to the kingdom. Okay? You have all of the data that's required for the university to make decisions. Now, our problem is a lot of times we don't align what we have in our databases with what the needs are for the university. And that's a shift that has to happen. You have to be proactive in providing data to the university and not reactive. They have to be able to get the data when they need it, because if they don't, they make a decision before the data is ready, and it's not the right decision many times. So it has to be aligned with the university. It has to be easy to get. And one of the things that happens inside of Advise is it gives an individual scoring plan for every student that you have. Well, that scoring plan is not based on what's happening at an Ivy League school, and that scoring plan is not based on what's happening to your neighbor's school. That scoring plan is designed based on what's happening at your school. So if you say, well, what's important to me is a financial aid hold is not on a student account, well, that goes into the scoring plan. Well, what we found out as we were going through this process is the first scoring plans that we built were very reactive. Okay? Why were they very reactive? Well, we said if a student had a hold on their account, a financial aid hold, or an academic hold, that we were likely to lose that student. Well, that's important to know, right? But what if it's too late? If you allow a student to come into this university, and we use a 4.0 GPA system, so 4.0 is an A all the way down. If their first semester they make a 0.125, what's the likelihood that that student's going to persist to the next year? Probably 0, right? So if you identify that student when the GPA is turned in, then you probably miss the opportunity to save that student. So what we had to do was we had to redefine what we were looking at, or the data we were looking at, to be earlier in the process. We wanted first assessments. Now, a lot of schools will talk about fifth-year assessment and fifth-week assessment. And fifth-week assessment's great. But if they bomb their first 5 exams or first 5 tests in those first 5 weeks, you're probably behind the curve. If they miss their first 10 classes, then it's hard for that student to catch up. So we needed earlier assessments. We actually, this semester, have imported over 100,000 grades into Advise that it actually looks at and tells us where students are having problems. We also imported the attendance of those students. So we can take the attendance and the grades and get a much earlier, proactive identification of students that are having problems. So we're allowed to identify. Now, if that was the case across all of our students, and we built one tool that said, okay, we're going to identify these students that have a problem, does that fit? Or is that small shoe again? We need the ability to identify different sectors or different groups of students, because a first-year, first-time freshman has a different success scoring plan than a sophomore does. A sophomore, once we get them to the sophomore stage, it should be easy cruising for that person, and we've got a lot more data. But that first-time freshman, we don't have a GPA. Okay? So we have ACT scores, and we have their high school transcript that we can identify the people that are at problem. Also, we know that students coming into our classes have classes that they take that we call high DFWs. High classes, the likelihood for them to fail. So if we identify a student that's going into a high DFW class, we can let that student know that you may want to get some extra tutoring because only 50% of the students taking this class actually persist or pass the class. So we are able to create this purposeful engagement based on where a student is at in that program. So if we're looking at that student life cycle, we can have an engagement plan for freshmen. We can break it down and we can have an engagement plan for freshmen that come out of a particular high school that we know their math skills are going to be weak. Okay? And we've identified those schools. We know particular schools that when they come out, they're going to have weak math skills. And the likelihood of them being able to pass college algebra is low. So if we get them the help that they need earlier in the process, the likelihood for them to persist is much, much greater. Okay? So it's highly customizable there. So how do we identify students that are at risk? Let's see if I've got a formula. Academic performance, financial performance, semester performance, high-risk enrollment, and actually course performance is what we look at. Course performance actually goes into a different area, and I can show you all that. But the scoring rules are different for different performances. So I can identify students that are having problems paying their bills. I can identify problems with students that are having academic issues. And then we can provide information or resources that help that individual versus just blanketing them with emails that says, hey, you need to go see your advisor. We can say, hey, you may need math tutoring. So then, based on those scores, I can create action items. Now, what is an action item? An action item can be something, or an alert can be something that I alert the advisor, I can alert the faculty member, I can alert the student. And I can do that in multiple different ways. One way that I can alert the advisor is I can put a task on their Outlook calendar that says, you need to contact this student because they're having trouble in class. Okay? That's good for the advisor. I can send an email to the student that says, you need to go see your advisor. And then I can send a text message to the student as a follow-up if the advisor doesn't close the action that the student has actually came and seen the advisor. So I can follow up with that student in multiple different ways to make sure that they go see the advisor, that they get the resources they need. Because, I don't know about y'all, but when I went to college, it was a large system. It was uncomfortable because I didn't know the answers. And as the problem solver, I like to always have the answer. I didn't like to go to somebody and say, I don't know the answer to this. And our students don't like to go to somebody and say, I don't know the answer to this. You know, we polled our students and we said, should we alert your professors when you're struggling? You know what they said? Yes, to alert my professors when I'm having a problem, because again, you have all of the data. If you have all of the data and you're not using it, they think sometimes that we're not doing what we should be doing. So, did I cover everything? So you can generate custom alerts to emails, and it's a much more proactive way of handling student success. So what kind of communications do we have at Delta State? Well, the first thing that we learned is you don't want to always send out negative emails on Friday, okay? Because then they learn that the system, that's kind of the whack-a-mole mentality, is that we're just going to beat you up on Friday and we're going to say you did bad on your test, because most of the time our faculty members were entering grades on Friday, so we were alerting on Friday. So we said, no, that's not the way to do it. We want to congratulate students based on their positive achievements. We started one simple little thing that was, happy birthday, okay? Here is a cup of coffee. Have a cup of coffee on us. It says we care about you. We care about you as a student. We also wanted to say, congratulations. You made the president's list, or you made the dean's list, okay? So it was an encouraging, motivational thing. Well, we haven't done it yet, but we're working with several deans of the college to have an ice cream party or an ice cream social based on them achieving a certain level. It is great to make the students feel like and know that you care for them as a university. They're not a number, because numbers are not important. People are important. We're important, right? We don't want to be a number. So then, so once we get those positive issues going out, we can turn around and we can start shaping the negative issues. Instead of saying, you did bad in a class, you can say, here's the resources that we have available for you because we know that you're going into a difficult and challenging class. How can we help you be a better student at Delta State? So that's a positive reinforcement for a negative situation that we can do. These high DFW classes, we have the data. We know that if somebody takes college algebra, that their pass ratio is about 50%. We have about 50% of the people that take college algebra and succeed. So if we know that already, why not just tell them, hey, you're probably going to need a tutor to be successful in this class. Notify individuals of account holes. So when we placed academic holds on our students in Banner, we actually didn't tell them anything. You know when the first time they found out that they had an academic hold on their account was when they went to register for classes? So if they go to register for classes and they find out that they have a hold on their account, they can't get the classes they're in, they're already frustrated with the university because we're not providing them information that we could. It was a simple workflow that we programmed in Advise to say, send out an email when a student has a hold on their account. We have the information, send it to them. Update them when registration is open, let students know when they need tutoring. Inform the advisors. Our advisors wanted to help students, but they didn't have access to information that needed to help students. They didn't have access to early course scores. They didn't have access to attendance. So by providing that information, our advisors were able to help students be more successful. So what were the results? I told you I'd tell you the results. Remember, we were talking about a subset of our population. That was students that had anywhere from a 17 to a 21 in their ACT score. Their beginning retention was 58%. We moved that to 89.5%. That's phenomenal. Is it good enough? No. Because until we get that to 100%, I'm not going to be happy, because that 10% that we lost may be one of your sons and daughters. It may be my son and daughter. And I don't want that to happen at any university. I think 100% of our students can be successful. They came here with the anticipation of being successful, and I think we can make them successful. The first-time freshman retention rate for the overall university, this is not just that subset, improved by 8.3%. Okay? From a number standpoint, that is phenomenal. Okay? But from a human standpoint, that is awesome to have that student that may be the person that cures cancer, that writes the next software program, that puts Microsoft out of business, or whatever they do. that student was successful. And that should be something that you should feel good about. 94% of those Oprah scholars, that 17 to 21, were in good academic standing. That means that those people that were failing algebra before were no longer failing algebra, just because we were able to provide them the resources that we already had. We didn't have to add staff. We just pointed them in the right direction of the people that already existed. 40% of them earned a B average or higher. Okay? That is great. You know, but it is because of the technology, but it's also because of the personal touch. It's because we provided the information in a way that the students could receive it. We provided it to the advisors, we provided it to the students, we provided it to the individuals that needed access to, and that's our job as technologists, is to make that information available in a way that they could use it. What are we going to learn? What's our next steps? Keep pushing the envelope. Advise is not a set it and forget it thing. Okay? It's not something that you install and then a year later you just sit back in your chair and say, well, this is great. It's something that you continually got to be looking at those pockets of students. You continually got to be writing workflows. You've got to be doing what needs to be done to make them successful. You've got to keep people vested and moving forward with it. And you've got to continue to create campus buy-in. And you say, well, okay, how do I create campus buy-in? I had an opportunity one time to talk to a group of people similar to you. And we were talking about making change in higher education and how difficult it is. And one gentleman stood up and he said, you know, it's crazy that it takes us 6 months to get a policy adopted or accepted. And yes, it is, because in the business world it moves much faster. But I said, you know, back when I was in South Mississippi, we used to love making gumbo. And do y'all know what gumbo is? Anybody know what gumbo is? Okay, gumbo is this thick soup. And my parents used to make me make this thick soup. And the good thing about gumbo, or what I always thought was the good thing about gumbo, was the sparkly, shiny stuff. The stuff that we put in at the end of the gumbo. That was the crab meat and the shrimp and all that stuff that people think makes gumbo good. That's not what makes gumbo good. What makes gumbo good is the roux. And the roux is the thick, soupy stuff that you have to stir at the pot, at the beginning of it. And my parents used to make me sit there for hours stirring the roux. But if you mess up on the roux, the gumbo is bad. And that's the thing with change in higher education is you have to stir the roux. You have to get that buy-in. You have to work with various departments across campus to get them on the same path that you're on. Stir the roux, and then the outcome is going to be good. If you jump to that sparkly, shiny stuff to start with, you mess up the roux. You don't have the outcome that you're looking for, and that's important. So what are we going to do? We're going to continue deployment across campus with both Recruit and Advise. We have both softwares at Delta State. Recruiter, I have some slides on here, but I'm not going to get into them about it. If you have any questions about Recruit, feel free to ask me about it. I'm going to be around after this. But we do have a Recruiter. That's what we're using to drive our recruiting process. And we have a bunch of workflows and stuff. Create additional items. You know, create those things that make the students happy. Create those things where students feel like you care about them as part of the process. And then use that data that we're getting to identify additional students that are at risk, those students that are in pockets, and make changes. So I'm just going to jump through all of the Recruiter slides because we're not going to get to them. Recruiter is a very powerful tool, just like Advise. It is a tool. It can identify a lot of things. We identify where our students are coming from. We identify how many students we have in our funnel. We push this information out to our president, our provost. They can see information. So it's a powerful tool. Again, I can talk to you more about it in the future. There's the funnel of our prospects coming in Delta State. We can see where they're coming in. We can predict how many students we have based on these numbers. So if we know if we're going to have a shortfall in students. It's really good. With that, I thank you very much for letting me come to your country. I have learned so much here about history of Mexico that I've never had a clue about before. And that's one of the other reasons why we're in higher education is about lifelong learning. We learn from each other. We share ideas with each other. And, you know, I've learned just as much from y'all since I've been here. Y'all's a Mississippi term. Y'all since I've been here as hopefully I've been able to share with you. So thank you for your time, and I'll open it up to questions. And I'm supposed to have a translator.
Si alguien desea puede hacer su pregunta en español, sin ningún problema. Nuestra traductora pues se la traducirá. De este lado tenemos la primera.
Muchas gracias. ¿Cuánto sería el costo estimado por estudiante para la plataforma de CRM que nos presentó? Porque pues, obviamente los resultados son muy interesantes, pero tenemos que dimensionar nosotros qué tan viable es que la implementemos en nuestras instituciones.
Okay, thank you. I will tell you that the software was actually purchased with a grant that we had from the state, so the First in the World grant. There's two prices to the software. There is the actual software itself, and then there's implementation. Okay, so both of those were around, and I'll tell you how much we paid for our portion of it. I think they were around the $70,000 range per, but I don't know how that translates to Mexican dollars or pesos. And if there's any additional discounts that your university may get that our university doesn't get.
I meant not only the software, but the code-based implementation and the operation of the application.
Okay, so for operations, and so I just talked about what we installed. We added another IT person that their role is nothing but the two CRMs, so we added another IT position. They handle recruit and advise, and they write workflows, they work with departments, they're on those entry line meetings, so they handle those conversations. From a server architecture, a hardware architecture, everything that we have is virtualized, so we added it to our existing server infrastructure. And so we didn't have to buy any additional hardware. Does that answer pretty much?
I meant like roughly the cost per student as an indicator of, you know, universities come in all sizes, and we could, you know, like measure on our own how much would it cost for our case.
Okay. It's not, our part is not, it wasn't licensed per student, it was just a one-size-fits-all, so we have a site license for it. Since we haven't had any students graduated, so this is the second year, we haven't had any students that actually graduate, so I can't say that these students persisted all the way to the end, but we added a lot of other things in there as well as the student success software, so that as SOS alerts, are added in there as well, so I don't have a per student. Now, I may go back home and run a report to try to get a per student, because you've got me thinking now.
De este lado tenemos una pregunta más.
Thank you. On the implementation side, you involved a lot of people in your team to work with and set up the system to work the beautiful numbers you show us, but how long it took for them to adopt the tool and work it the way it did?
Okay, so from adoption, we're actually still adopting. We're rolling it out, and we'll continue to build this over the next years, several years, because we're adding things to it over time. So some of the things that are new that we may add in the future is we just started a workflow that allows us to identify students that haven't registered yet, and then build a communication plan around that student. So it starts off with emails, and then it goes to a voice call, and then it goes to text messaging to get that student to enroll, so identifying those pockets. So we're continuing to build it. But the actual initial implementation took about probably 3 months.
Excuse me, and on the setting up the workflows and evolving the tool and doing all the little fixes, you do it with your team, or do you hire the services from the provider?
We actually do it with our team, and I like doing it with my team for one reason, is because once they build the workflow, then they understand it, so if it needs tweaking in some way, then they can fix it. So we do a lot of the building with our team, and we adjust the workflows. Like, remember I talked about proactive and reactive? We're moving a lot of stuff to more proactive. The more proactive we can get, the better. So we're adjusting those scores throughout the semester, and we even build, I talked about a little bit about building different scores for different populations. So we have the College of Business, we have a different score for them. We have College of Education, we have different indicators and scores for them. We have a nursing program, we have different scores. So we're always constantly making modifications and making the software better.
Congratulations.
Two of the systems, and I didn't say this in the presentation, two of the systems that we actually connect to, that we pull data from, Banner, which is our ERP system, and Canvas, which is our learning management system.
Bien, pues, muchísimas gracias. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
In the name of ANUIES, we want to give you a present for your participation in the first meeting ANUIES-TIC. Thank you so much.